The quiet morning of the young couple was shattered by a 6 a.m. text message. The photo was a mountain of luggage at an airport terminal, and the caption underneath read, "Coming to live with my wonderful son, permanently." Before the wife could even process the shock, her husband leaped out of bed and frantically started pulling her things out of the bedroom closet, clearing space for his mommy. Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'm excited to share a new, compelling story with you today. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Brenda returned from her trip on a Sunday evening. Michael had gone to pick her up at the airport, while I stayed home, preparing dinner and setting the table. My mother-in-law swept into our apartment with 2 bags of gifts and an expression on her face like she'd just won the lottery. Her eyes were sparkling, her cheeks were flushed. She somehow looked years younger. She tossed her coat onto a chair without even bothering to hang it up, flopped onto the sofa, and immediately launched into her story. "Mikey, you just won't believe how Carol is living." She clapped her hands, the bangles on her wrists clinking together. A 3-bedroom in the heart of downtown, brand new renovations, a kitchen the size of a ballroom. Her kids moved in with her 2 years ago, they asked to. They live in perfect harmony. Carol looks after the grandkids, and they bring her breakfast in bed. Now, that's what I call a family. Michael nodded and smiled along. I silently poured tea into the mugs. Brenda continued, breathless with excitement. She says she's never been happier. Every day, her children are right there, helping her, caring for her, not like some people. She shot a meaningful glance in my direction, but I pretended not to notice, and it got me thinking, why does everyone else have that, but I don't? Michael patted his mother's shoulder, murmuring something soothing. I placed a plate of sandwiches on the coffee table and sat down across from them. Brenda had already moved on to the details of how Carol had decorated the nursery for her grandchildren, the kind of drapes she had in the living room, the furniture they had all picked out together. I was only half listening, but I noticed the way my mother-in-law was looking at Michael, a particular look, filled with hope and calculation. This wasn't just the story of an impressed friend. It was a proposal. When Brenda finally left for her place in the suburbs, Michael walked her down to the Uber. He came back looking pensive, and spent the rest of the evening silently scrolling through his phone, his brow furrowed. I didn't ask what was wrong. I already knew. The seed had been planted. Now, we just had to wait for it to sprout. The first call came 3 days later. I was washing dishes. Michael was on the sofa with his laptop. His phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up with Mom. Michael answered, putting it on speaker. It was a habit of his. He never hid his calls. "Mikey, honey, I'm so sorry to bother you." Brenda's voice was weary, breathless. "My blood pressure is acting up again. This morning it shot up to 180. I almost called 911. I took my pills and it's a little better, but my head is splitting." Michael immediately tensed up, pushing his laptop aside. "Mom, did you call your doctor?" "What doctor, Mikey?" A sigh crackled through the speaker. "My PCP is on vacation, and the next appointment I could get with the cardiologist isn't for 2 weeks. I'm taking the medication as prescribed, but it feels like it's not working anymore. Maybe I've built up a tolerance." Michael promised to come over on the weekend to check her medicine cabinet and consult with a doctor friend of his. Brenda thanked him in a quiet, long-suffering voice and said goodbye. Michael hung up and sat in silence for a minute, then stood and paced the room. His face was grim, his eyebrows knitted together. "She's really not well," he said, as if trying to convince himself. "All alone out there. If something happens, who's going to help her?" I said nothing. What was there to say? This was only the beginning. The next call came a week later. It was evening. Michael had just gotten home from work and was taking off his shoes in the entryway. The phone came to life again. And again, it was his mother's voice. This time filled with anxiety. "Mikey, I barely slept a wink last night. My legs are so swollen I can't even zip up my boots. And the neighbors upstairs were fighting until 3 in the morning again." I banged on the ceiling, but it was useless. They're drinking and blasting music every week. I complained to the landlord, and he just said, "File a police report." But who's going to pay attention to that? Michael sighed heavily, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Mom, maybe you should try talking to the neighbors. You know, person to person." "I've tried, Mikey. They don't answer the door, and when they do, they're rude, saying, 'We're not being loud, it's all in your head.' I'm scared to even approach them anymore. A single woman, you never know what could happen. A heavy pause hung in the air. I was in the kitchen, hearing every word. Brenda was expertly playing the victim card without overdoing it. It was a classic move: present a problem, hint at vulnerability, and let her son's guilt do the rest. After the call, Michael paced the apartment for 2 hours, looking darker than a thundercloud. He couldn't focus on dinner, opening and closing the fridge multiple times without taking anything out. "Maybe she really is scared over there," he said as we got into bed. "It's not the safest neighborhood. The building is old, the neighbors are drunks. It's tough for a woman her age to be alone." I turned on my side, looking at his profile in the darkness. "Your mother has lived there her whole life. She's managed just fine. She was younger then," he sighed. "And now her health is failing." I remained silent. Arguing was pointless when her son had already swallowed the bait. 2 weeks later, Brenda switched tactics. She called on a Saturday morning, her voice bright and almost cheerful. "Mikey, how are things? How's the girl?" She always called me that, the girl, as if I were 15, not 28. "Listen, I was just thinking. I've saved up a little money. Maybe you two need something? For a renovation? Some new furniture? Don't be shy. I'd be happy to help." Michael was surprised and started to refuse, saying we were fine and didn't need anything. Brenda insisted. "Well, maybe there's something you've wanted to buy but have been putting off. I know how hard it is for young people these days. You know, Carol's kids were the same. They refused at first, but then they all picked out a new kitchen set together. It turned out beautifully. I'd love to invest in something useful for you." Michael was touched, and he thanked her, saying we would think about it and let her know if anything came to mind. When he hung up, his eyes were misty. "See what a great mom she is?" He smiled at me. "Living on her pension, and she's offering us money." I nodded and poured him some coffee, a knot tightening in my stomach. Brenda was buying herself an indulgence, a get-out-of-jail-free card for the future. Good deeds now, an alibi later, so that she could eventually say, "I helped you so much, and now you're refusing me a roof over my head?" It was an old, proven, and foolproof scheme. I wasn't just sitting by idly. The next day, after Michael left for work, I pulled all the documents for the condo out of our filing cabinet. The deed was solely in my name. My grandmother had left me this one bedroom 6 years ago, long before I met Michael. I reread every line, checked the seals and signatures. Everything was clean, sole and separate property. Michael's name wasn't on the title. He wasn't registered as a resident. He wasn't mentioned anywhere. We had gotten married a year ago, but he was still officially listed as living at his mother's address. I hadn't pushed the issue back then. It didn't seem urgent. Now I realized it was my insurance policy. I scanned all the documents, saved copies to a flash drive, uploaded them to the cloud, and emailed them to myself for good measure. Then I put the originals back in their folder and tucked them away in the furthest corner of the top shelf of the closet. That evening, I acted as I always did: cooked dinner, watched a series with Michael, discussed the news. He didn't notice a thing. A week later, Brenda called again. This time, her voice was trembling. "Mikey, I fell at the grocery store today, right at the checkout. I missed a step, dropped a bag of potatoes, and scraped up my knee. My elbow, too. I was lying there on the floor, thinking someone would help me, but no one even stopped. Everyone just walked past me like I was invisible. A security guard eventually helped me up and walked me to a bench. I sat there for half an hour until my head cleared. That's how it is, Mikey. Lonely old people are invisible to everyone." Her voice broke, and I could hear her start to sob. Michael turned pale and jumped up from the sofa. "Mom, did you see a doctor? What if it's a fracture?" No, Mikey. It's just a bad bruise." But it was so scary. Can you imagine? What if I'd hit my head? Or worse? And no one would have helped. "No one," she cried softly, pitifully. Michael stood in the middle of the room, clutching his phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. After the call, he paced back and forth for 2 hours, staring out the window in silence. I made him some tea. He didn't touch it, just sat there, staring at a single spot on the wall. "She's completely alone out there," he finally said. "If something happens, who will even know?" I didn't answer. It was a rhetorical question. Michael was already making his decision. The next 2 weeks were quiet. Brenda didn't call, and I almost let myself relax. Almost. But my gut told me it was the calm before the storm. And then she called again. Her voice was no longer trembling, but thoughtful and soft. Mikey, I was thinking, maybe we should see each other more often? You come over so rarely, work, other things, I get it. But I'm just sitting here by myself. Time drags on. What if I came over to your place for the weekend? Sometimes. I don't want to impose, I just miss you. Michael was delighted. Of course, Mom, come on over. We're always happy to have you. Brenda chirped about the pies she would bake and the jam she would bring. I listened, feeling a chill run down my spine. She was testing the waters, preparing her beachhead. That same evening, after Michael had gone to bed, I took a small, black, discreet voice recorder out of my nightstand drawer. I'd bought it a month ago at an electronics store, just in case. I checked the battery, made sure the memory was clear, and put it back under a stack of notebooks. Then, I waited. Brenda came over a week later, bringing a jar of jam, a bag of pies, and a mountain of complaints. She sat down at the table. I poured the tea, and she was off. The neighbors were loud again. The light bulb in the hallway hadn't been changed in 3 weeks. The elevator was broken. It was so hard to walk up to the 4th floor. Michael nodded sympathetically. I refilled the tea and said nothing. That evening, when I went to the kitchen to do the dishes, Brenda stayed in the living room with her son. The door was slightly ajar. I could hear snippets of their conversation. My mother-in-law was speaking in a low, persuasive tone. Mikey, please don't think I'm just complaining. It's just that it's gotten really hard for me out there. I'm scared being alone, and my health isn't what it used to be. I don't want to be a burden, but sometimes I think Carol's kids are right there with her. And where are mine? Far away. They visit once a month, if I'm lucky. Michael mumbled something, trying to reassure her. I wiped my hands, quietly moved closer to the door, and listened. Brenda continued. You know, I look at my 2-bedroom apartment and think, what do I even need all this space for? I could sell it, move closer to you, or maybe even move in together, if there's room. I mean, Carol has a 3-bedroom, so there was plenty of space for everyone. You guys have, well, it's a 1-bedroom, of course, but we could make it work somehow, right? I froze. There it was. The mask was finally off. Michael was silent for a few seconds, then said cautiously, Mom, we'd have to think about that. I need to talk it over with the girl. Of course, Brenda quickly agreed. I'm not rushing you. It's just an idea. You think about it, Mikey. I went back to the kitchen and finished the dishes. My blood was boiling, but my face remained a mask of calm. Later, we walked Brenda down to her Uber. She kissed her son, gave me a little wave, and left looking very pleased with herself. Michael was lost in thought for the entire next week. I didn't bring up the topic, waiting. I knew he would bring it up himself. I wasn't wrong. On Saturday evening, as we were sitting in the kitchen, he suddenly said, Hey, what if Mom really did move closer? It's getting so hard for her out there alone. I looked up from my phone. Closer? What do you mean? Well, she could rent a place in a nicer neighborhood. He shrugged. Or, I don't know, maybe she could move in with us for a little while, just until she finds something suitable. I nodded and poured myself a glass of water, my voice steady. Michael, we have a 600 square foot, 1-bedroom condo. Where would she sleep? He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. Well, we could set up the sofa bed. It would just be temporary. And where would we sleep? On the sofa bed, too. We'd be a little cramped. But Mom's older, she can't sleep on the couch. I nodded again, stood up, and took my glass to the sink. Michael was watching me cautiously, waiting for my reaction. I smiled. Okay, let's think about it. He let out a breath of relief and wrapped his arms around my shoulders. Thanks for understanding. It won't be for long, I promise. She's not doing this on purpose. I nodded against his shoulder, but inside, I was thinking only one thing. It's time to act. The next day, while Michael was out playing basketball with his friends, I started packing. Not everything, just the most valuable things. My grandmother's jewelry, the gold chain, the sapphire earrings, the emerald ring. All my important documents, my passport, birth certificate, our marriage certificate, all my bank statements, and the spare credit cards I rarely used. I packed it all into a duffel bag and called my friend Jessica. Can I swing by for half an hour? Of course. Jess didn't ask why. She always knew when I needed help. I drove over, and we had coffee in her kitchen. I quickly explained the situation. Jess listened silently, then nodded. Leave it here. It'll be safe for as long as you need. We hid the bag in her closet behind her winter coats. I got home an hour before Michael, and he never suspected a thing. The next step was the bank. I opened a new savings account, separate from the joint one Michael and I used. I transferred half of my salary from the last 3 months into it. This was my personal money, earned before the marriage and never commingled. I set up an automatic transfer. From now on, every paycheck would be split in two. Half would go to the new account. Michael never monitored my finances or asked how much was in my account, so he wouldn't notice this either. And finally, the voice recorder. I started carrying it with me constantly in the pocket of my robe, in my purse, on a shelf in the bathroom. I turned it on every time Brenda called Michael, recording their conversations, saving the files to a flash drive, and backing them up to the cloud. 2 weeks later, the pivotal conversation happened. Brenda called on a Wednesday evening. Michael was on the sofa. I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for a salad. The recorder was on the windowsill, running. My mother-in-law's voice was firm, resolute. Mikey, I've thought about it, and I've made a decision. I'm selling my apartment. There's no point in keeping that 2-bedroom. It's just causing me stress. Once I get the money, I'm moving in with you. You're okay with that, right? Michael was silent. I could hear his heavy, uneven breathing. Mom, but we only have a 1-bedroom. So what? Carol's living in a 3-bedroom with her kids, and you two can't fit in a 1-bedroom? That's ridiculous. I don't take up much space. All I need is a bed. The rest doesn't matter. You'll give me the bedroom. You and the girl can make do in the living room. A pause. Then Michael's quiet voice. Mom, I need to talk to my wife about this. Why? Brenda sounded surprised, even offended. I'm your mother, Mikey. You owe me this. I raised you all by myself. Your father left when you were 3. I gave you everything, my whole life, and now all I'm asking for is a roof over my head. And it's only temporary, until I get used to the new area. Is your little wife really more important than your mother? Another pause. I froze. The knife hovered over a carrot. No, Mom, of course not. It's just what? Brenda's voice hardened. Mikey, I've already made up my mind. I'm showing the apartment to buyers in 2 weeks. They're ready to make an offer. As soon as I get the money, I'll pack my things and move. You should probably give your little wife a heads up that your mom needs help. She's a smart girl. She'll understand. Okay, Mom. I'll talk to her. That's my boy. I knew you wouldn't let me down. The call ended. I turned off the recorder, took out the flash drive, and slipped it into the pocket of my robe. I walked into the living room. Michael was sitting there, staring at his phone, his face pale, his lips pressed into a thin line. What's wrong? I asked calmly. He looked up, forcing a smile. Oh, nothing. Mom just called. She said she's thinking of selling her apartment and moving closer to us. He nodded. Temporarily, until she gets settled. I see. I nodded. Okay, we'll think about it. Michael let out a sigh of relief and hugged me. Thanks for not being against it. I promise, it's not for long. I said nothing, just leaned against his shoulder, thinking, yes, Michael, not for long, but not in the way you think. The next day, I made an appointment with a lawyer. The law firm was in a downtown high-rise, on the 7th floor of a glass and steel building. I booked a slot for Friday morning, took a personal day from work, and told Michael I had a dentist appointment. He just nodded, not asking any questions. Lately, he'd been too consumed by his own thoughts to pay much attention to my schedule. The lawyer was a woman in her 50s with a sharp haircut and an observant gaze. She introduced herself as Miss Davis. She listened to my story in silence, occasionally nodding and jotting down notes. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and folded her hands on the desk. Do you have the property documents with you? I pulled out the folder and handed it to her. Miss Davis looked through the deed, the title report I'd ordered online the day before, studying everything carefully, running her finger along the lines. The condo is titled solely in your name, she said finally, acquired through inheritance prior to the marriage. This means it is not considered marital property. Your husband has no legal claim to it. So he can't evict me? Not a chance. Miss Davis shook her head. You are the sole owner. In fact, you can evict anyone residing in the property without your consent. That includes your husband's relatives and even your husband himself. I nodded, feeling a cold calm spread through me. And if they refuse to leave? Then you go through the courts. You file an eviction lawsuit, providing proof of your ownership. The court will side with you, 100%. Then you get a court order, and the sheriff's department will ensure they are removed by force if necessary. How long would that take? A couple of months, if the other party doesn't try to delay. But it usually doesn't get to that point. Once people realize the law isn't on their side, they typically leave on their own. Miss Davis handed my documents back and gave me her business card. If you need assistance, call me. I can draft the complaint and represent you in court. But based on your situation, I think you can handle this without lengthy proceedings. The key is to be firm and not give in to manipulation. I thanked her, paid for the consultation, and walked outside. The sun was bright, the air crisp and cool. As I walked to the subway, I felt my resolve hardening with every step. The plan was fully formed. All I had to do was wait for the right moment. That evening, Brenda called again. Michael was in the kitchen eating dinner. I was washing dishes. He answered and put her on speaker. His mother's voice was giddy with excitement. Mikey, I have news. The buyers came to see the apartment. They loved everything. They're ready to buy it. No negotiating. For my full asking price. Tomorrow, we're going to the lawyer's office to sign the papers and get the deposit. In 3 weeks, the deal closes, and I'll be free. Michael choked on his food, coughed, and grabbed a glass of water. Mom, that's so fast. Why wait? Brenda laughed. The sooner the better. I've already started packing. You can't imagine how much stuff I've accumulated over the years. I'll throw half of it out, of course, but I'll still have at least 7 suitcases. 7? Michael went pale. Well, yeah. Clothes, dishes, books, linens. I'll buy new furniture. The buyers agreed to take the old stuff. But my personal belongings are sacred. I'm taking all of it with me. You don't mind, do you, Mikey? Michael was silent. I could see the muscle in his jaw twitching, his fingers tightening on the glass. Mom, we haven't really discussed it with my wife yet. What's there to discuss? Brenda cut him off, her voice growing sharp. Mikey, I'm your mother. I have nowhere else to go. Are you really going to kick me out onto the street? I gave my whole life to you. I gave you everything. Now it's my turn to be taken care of. That's natural. It's what normal families do. Carol's kids welcomed her with open arms. And you're hesitating. I'm not hesitating, Mom. It's just what? The girl is against it? Well, you need to explain to her that it's temporary. I'm not moving in forever. I just need to get acclimated to the new area, get my bearings, and then I'll find a small rental nearby. A year, tops. A year. I leaned back against the sink, crossing my arms. A year in a 1-bedroom condo. 3 of us. Brenda in the bedroom, us on a pull-out sofa. A year of arguments, complaints, and interference in every aspect of our lives. Okay, Mom, Michael caved. I'll talk to her. That's a good boy. I knew you wouldn't let me down. Kisses, sweetheart. Get ready to welcome me. I'll be there in 3 weeks. She hung up. Michael sat staring at his plate of cold soup. I dried my hands on a towel, walked over, and sat across from him. Michael, we need to talk. He looked up, his expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. I know what you're going to say, but she's my mother. I can't abandon her. I'm not asking you to abandon her. I'm asking you to think about what this will actually look like. 600 square feet for 3 people, with no separate rooms, no personal space. For a year. She said it's temporary. Brenda is selling her apartment, Michael. She'll have nowhere to go back to. What do you think will happen if she doesn't find a suitable place in a year? He was silent, looking away. Then it'll be 2 years. 3. 5. She won't leave until we move out. And we have nowhere to move. This is my condo. Your condo? He repeated quietly. Yeah, I remember. You've made that pretty clear. I'm not hinting. I'm saying it directly. This is my property, and I do not consent to your mother moving in. Michael shot up from his chair. which scraped loudly against the floor. So that's it. You're giving me an ultimatum? It's either my mother or you? No. I'm simply explaining the reality of the situation. The reality? He gave a bitter laugh. The reality is that you're a selfish person. My mother is an elderly, sick, lonely woman. She needs help. And all you can think about is your own comfort. I stood up too, looking him straight in the eye. Your mother is healthy enough to travel, pack 7 suitcases, and orchestrate a cross-country move. She's not a helpless old woman, Michael. She's a manipulator, and you know it. You just don't want to admit it. That's enough, he waved his hand dismissively. I'm not listening to this. Mom is coming, and that's final. You'll just have to tolerate it. It's not for long. He stormed out of the kitchen and slammed the bathroom door. I stood there, listening to the sound of running water. The last bit of warmth inside me turned to ice. The decision had been made for me, without me. Fine. I had a decision of my own. The next day, I drove to Jessica's and dropped off another bag with clothes, shoes, and toiletries, anything I would hate to lose. Jess silently stored it with the first one in her closet. When? She asked simply. Soon. 3 weeks, max. She nodded and poured me tea. We sat in her kitchen, and for the first time in a month, I felt like I could breathe. Are you sure about this? Jess asked. Absolutely. What if he comes to his senses? He won't. Brenda's already selling her place. There's no turning back now. Jess was quiet for a moment, then squeezed my hand. If you need anything, my couch is always available, for as long as you need. I squeezed back and nodded. I knew I wouldn't need it. This was my condo, and I wasn't the one who would be leaving. The next 2 weeks passed in a tense silence. Michael barely spoke to me, coming home late and leaving early. Brenda called every day, reporting on her progress. The deposit was paid, the documents filed with the county. The buyers were eager to close. Michael listened, grunted in acknowledgement, and threw guilty glances my way. I pretended not to notice, all the while methodically recording every single one of their conversations. The most valuable one came a week before the move. Brenda called in the evening. Michael was in the living room. I was in the bathroom, but I'd left the door cracked open. The recorder was on a shelf, running. Mikey, I was just thinking. My mother-in-law's voice was thoughtful. Maybe you should suggest to the girl that it's time for you two to upgrade? You know, sell the 1-bedroom, buy a bigger 2-bedroom place. Then there'd be room for everyone. Mom, it's her condo. She'll never agree to sell it. So convince her. Tell her it's for the family. That family is more important. If she loves you, she'll meet you halfway. I don't know, Mom. Mikey. Brenda's voice turned to steel. Are you a man or a doormat? She's your wife. You're the head of the family. Tell her how it's going to be, and that's that. If she refuses, it means she doesn't respect you. And what's the point of a wife like that? A pause. Then Michael's quiet voice. Okay, Mom, I'll try to talk to her. That's my boy. I knew you'd do the right thing. Just be confident. Women love strong men. The call ended. I turned off the recorder, copied the file to the flash drive, and backed it up to the cloud. This was the master recording, the proof that Brenda wasn't planning a temporary stay, but a full-scale invasion of my life, with the ultimate goal of pushing me out of my own home. That evening, Michael tried to bring it up. He sat next to me on the sofa, placing a hand on my shoulder. Listen, I was thinking, maybe we really should look into upgrading. We could sell your condo, add some money, and buy a 2-bedroom. Then Mom would have a place to stay, and it would be more comfortable for us. I pulled away and looked at him. Are you serious? Yeah, why not? It's a solution. It would be good for everyone. Michael, this was my grandmother's condo. I am not selling it, but it's for the family. Mom is family too. Your mother is your family. My family is me. And for now, you. Though I'm starting to have my doubts. He flinched, as if I'd slapped him. So you're refusing to even discuss it? Correct. I see. He stood up, his face a stone mask. So, the condo is more important than your husband and his mother. It means I won't be manipulated into giving up my home. Nobody's taking it from you. You want me to sell my sole property and invest it into a joint one, where you can then move your mother in? So that later, if something happens, I'm left with nothing? No. Thanks. Michael said nothing. He just turned and walked into the bathroom. We didn't speak again that night. Brenda called 3 days later, on a Monday. Her voice was triumphant. Mikey, it's done. The sale went through. I got the money. The apartment is no longer mine. I'm booking my flight for tomorrow. I'll be there the day after. Get ready to welcome your mom. Michael congratulated her, promising to pick her up from the airport. When he hung up, his hands were shaking. The day after tomorrow, he said, looking at me. Did you hear? I heard. And? What are you going to say? Nothing. This was your decision. Our decision. You're my wife. You didn't ask for my opinion, Michael. You just presented me with a fact, because I had no choice. She's my mother. You had a choice. You could have said no. You could have offered to rent her an apartment nearby, helped her with money, visited her. But you chose to cram her into my one-bedroom condo against my will. He clenched his fists, breathing heavily. Fine. Have it your way. Mom will come, she'll stay for a while, and then she'll find her own place. But if you say one cross word to her, if you upset her in any way, I will never forgive you. Don't worry. I smiled coldly. I won't say a thing. Because there was no need to say anything. Everything had already been decided. The night before Brenda's arrival, I barely slept. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, running the plan over and over in my head. I got up at 6 a.m. and got ready quickly. Michael was still asleep. I didn't wake him. I left a note on the kitchen table. Early meeting at work. Keys are on the shelf. I grabbed my purse and slipped out quietly. I didn't go to work. I went to Jessica's and picked up all the things I'd stored there. Then I stopped by the bank and withdrew a few $100s in cash from my new account, just in case. After that, I drove to Miss Davis's office. I had called ahead to let her know I might need her on short notice. I'm ready, the lawyer said after hearing the latest update. Call me if you need anything. I can be there within the hour. I thanked her and drove back home, arriving around noon. The condo was empty. Michael had left for the airport to pick up his mom. I laid out all the documents on the dining table, the deed, the title report, the lawyer's business card. Next to them, I placed the voice recorder and the flash drive with all the recordings. Then I sat down on the sofa, poured myself a glass of water, and waited. Time crawled by. I watched the city life outside the window, tracked the hands on the clock, and imagined Brenda getting off the plane. I pictured Michael hugging her, them loading 7 suitcases into a cab, the drive here, their cheerful chatter, their plans. I could almost see my mother-in-law mentally redecorating my bedroom to her own taste. At 3 p.m., I heard voices in the hallway. The jingle of keys, the scrape of the lock. The door swung open. Michael came in first, followed by Brenda. Behind them was a taxi driver, hauling 2 enormous suitcases. Then another trip for 2 more. And another. I sat on the sofa and watched as the entryway filled with luggage. 7 suitcases, 3 duffel bags, 4 cardboard boxes. The driver wiped his forehead. Michael paid him and shut the door. Brenda stood in the middle of the cluttered entryway, her arms spread wide, beaming. Well, Mikey, I'm home. Finally. She tossed her jacket onto a suitcase and marched into the living room, looking around with an approving nod. Nice, cozy. I'll just rearrange a few things, and it'll be even better. Where's the bedroom? Right here, Mom, Michael pointed. My wife and I will take the sofa for now. You get settled in the room. Brenda peeked into the bedroom, her expression critical. The closet is a bit small. Oh well. We'll have to take half of your girls' things out. I need the space, and we'll change the bedding. I brought my own. These curtains need to go, too. They're so dreary. She spoke without turning around, as if it were all a matter of course. Michael just nodded in agreement. I stood up from the sofa and picked up the documents from the table. Brenda, we need to talk. She turned, looking at me with surprise. About what, dear? About the fact that you will not be living here. A heavy silence fell. Brenda blinked, confused. Michael took a step forward. What are you talking about? I held out the deed to him. This is my condo. It is my sole and separate property. You are not on the title, nor are you a registered resident. I am the one who decides who lives here, and I have not given my consent for your mother to move in. Michael took the document and stared at it, his tanned face draining of all color. You're serious? Completely. Brenda snatched the paper from her son's hand and scanned it. This has to be some kind of mistake, Mikey. You're her husband. You should be on the deed. We were married after I inherited the property. The condo is not marital property. Michael has no legal rights to it. That can't be. Brenda stomped her foot. Mikey, tell her to stop this ridiculous performance. Michael was silent, staring at me as if he were seeing me for the first time. So, you knew all along. You were preparing for this. Yes, I was. You deliberately never added me to the title. I didn't see the need. And now I see I was right. Brenda grabbed her son's arm, shaking it. Mikey, you're a man. You're the head of this family. Put her in her place. Michael jerked his arm away. How can I put anyone in their place, Mom? It's not my property. Then make it yours. Through the courts, through a divorce. I don't care how. I sold my apartment. I have nowhere to go. That's your problem, I said calmly. I didn't invite you. Brenda lunged at me, her face contorted with rage. You ungrateful, selfish brat. I'm his mother. I raised him by myself. I have a right to be cared for. You do, but not at my expense. She raised her hand to strike me. Michael caught her arm. Mom, don't. Don't? This witch is throwing me out on the street. I picked up the voice recorder and pressed play. Brenda's voice filled the room. Maybe you should suggest to the girl that it's time for you two to upgrade. If she refuses, it means she doesn't respect you. And what's the point of a wife like that? Then, Michael's voice. Okay, Mom, I'll try to talk to her. The recording ended. Brenda went white. Michael covered his face with his hands. You were recording us? His voice was full of disbelief. Yes, all of your conversations for the past month. It's called self-defense. You're a bitch, Brenda hissed. A cold, calculating bitch. Perhaps, I nodded. But this is my condo. And you're both leaving. Michael lowered his hands and looked at me. You're kicking me out too? You made your choice. Mother over wife. Fine. Live together. Just not here. We don't have money for a rental. Mom spent everything on new things and the move. Not my problem. Brenda collapsed onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Michael paced the room, running his hands through his hair. You can't do this. It's cruel. Cruel is pulling my things out of my closet and throwing them in a box without my permission. Cruel is inviting someone to live in a person's home without their consent. Cruel is plotting to push me out of my own property. I'm just protecting my rights. Michael stopped, breathing heavily. So what now? Now, you pack your things and you leave. Today, you have 3 hours. 3 hours? Brenda shot up. Where are we supposed to go? To a hotel? To friends? To a shelter? I don't care. But I want you gone by tonight. And if we refuse? Michael stepped towards me, his eyes blazing with anger. I pulled out my phone and showed him Miss Davis's number on the screen. Then I call the police and my lawyer. The police will document your trespassing. My lawyer will file for an emergency eviction. It will go to court, and you will lose. But that will take time. And all that time, you'll be living in a home where you are despised. Or you can leave now, peacefully. Michael stared at me, and I could see something breaking in his eyes. The illusion that he was in charge. The illusion that I would tolerate anything. You really mean it, he whispered. More than anything. Brenda clutched his sleeve. Mikey, do something. You're the man. He silently pulled his arm free and walked into the bedroom. I heard him open the closet and pull out a bag. Brenda scurried around the room, wailing and sobbing, then ran after her son, pleading with him. I remained standing in the middle of the room, phone in hand, just in case. Half an hour later, Michael emerged with a stuffed duffel bag. His face was a stone mask, his eyes empty. Brenda trailed behind him, dragging 2 suitcases. Her face was tear-stained, her mascara smudged. You'll regret this, she hissed as she passed me. You'll end up alone, and you'll be sorry. I said nothing. Michael paused at the door and turned back. This is the end. It ended the moment you threw my clothes on the floor without asking, I replied. I'm just making it official. He nodded and walked out. Brenda scrambled after him, hauling her suitcases. The door slammed shut. I walked over, turned the deadbolt, and slid the chain lock into place. Then I leaned my back against the door and closed my eyes. The silence was deafening and incredibly liberating. I stood by the door, listening as their footsteps faded down the stairs. I heard the hum of the elevator as it descended. Then, silence, a complete, thick, almost ringing silence. I opened my eyes and looked around. The entryway was still cluttered with suitcases. 5 of them were left. Brenda had only managed to take 2. Boxes were stacked against the wall, and bags lay scattered on the floor. The apartment looked like a storage unit, but it was my apartment. Mine alone. I walked into the living room and opened the window. Fresh air rushed in, clearing out the stale scent of other people's belongings and ambitions. I picked up my phone and texted Jessica. "It's done. They're gone." The reply came a second later. "You rock. Are you okay? Need me to come over?" I typed back. "I'm okay. Thanks. I just need to be alone for a bit." I sat on the sofa and poured a glass of water from the carafe on the table. My hands weren't shaking. My breathing was even. It was strange. I didn't feel any sense of triumph or malice. Just a hollow emptiness and relief, like I had finally taken off a heavy backpack after a long, uphill hike. The phone rang 10 minutes later. "Michael." I declined the call. He called back. I declined again. A text message came through. "We need to talk." I blocked his number. Then I blocked Brenda's number, just in case, though she had never called me directly. I stood up and went into the bedroom. The closet doors were wide open. Michael's things were gone. Only mine remained. The bed was unmade. He had packed in a hurry, with no time for neatness. I stripped the bedding and threw it in the washing machine. Then I returned to the entryway and began to tackle the mess. The 5 suitcases were packed to the brim. The first held Brenda's clothes, old-fashioned blouses, skirts, dresses, all clean, ironed, and smelling of mothballs. The second contained linens, towels, and tablecloths. The third was filled with dishes wrapped in newspaper plates with gold rims, teacups with rose patterns, crystal glasses. The heirloom china my mother-in-law had boasted about in her story about Carol. The 4th suitcase held books, photo albums, and some papers. The 5th was shoes, handbags, and jewelry boxes. I methodically took everything out, put it back in, and zipped the suitcases shut. I didn't even open the boxes. Their contents were no concern of mine. I worked in focused silence. An hour and a half later, everything was packed and neatly stacked by the door. The phone buzzed again. This time it was Jessica. "Hey, how are you holding up?" "I'm okay. Sorting through their stuff." "What are you going to do with it?" "I don't know. Maybe put it in storage. Or just leave it in the hallway for them to pick up." "Don't leave it in the hallway. The neighbors will either take it or the building manager will give you trouble. Let me come over. Mark and I can help you take it to a self-storage unit. It's not expensive, and it's the proper way to handle it." "Okay. Thank you." Jessica and her husband Mark arrived an hour later. Without a word, they loaded the suitcases and boxes into their car and drove them to a storage facility in an industrial park. They returned with a receipt. The items were being held for 1 month prepaid. After that, the owners could retrieve them by showing their ID. "Text the storage unit number to Michael," Jessica advised. "Let him know where to find it." I nodded. I unblocked his number for a moment, sent him the address and the unit number, and added a short message. "Your things are in storage. You have 1 month to pick them up, after which they will be disposed of." I didn't wait for a reply before blocking him again. Jessica stayed for another hour. We drank tea in the kitchen. Mark discreetly smoked on the balcony, staying out of our conversation. "Are you sure you did the right thing?" Jessica asked gently. "Absolutely. And if he comes back begging to be let in, I won't let him. Even without his mother." I paused, turning the teacup in my hands. "You know, Jess, it's not just about Brenda. It's about what he did. He threw my things out of my closet, in my condo, without even asking. He made a decision for me that I should be inconvenienced, that I should tolerate it, that I should sacrifice my comfort for his mother. He didn't see me as a partner. He saw me as an accessory to his life. You can't forgive something like that." Jessica nodded and squeezed my hand. "You're strong. You'll get through this." "I will." They left in the evening. I was alone. The apartment was empty, clean, and quiet. I made myself dinner, put on some music, and ate slowly. Then I went to bed in my own bed, in my own bedroom, in my own condo. I slept soundly, without dreaming. The morning started with a call from an unknown number. I answered cautiously. Hello? It's Brenda. Don't block me. Listen to me. My former mother-in-law's voice was tired but venomous. Michael and I have rented a room in a boarding house, 120 square feet for the two of us. Can you imagine how humiliating that is? I've lived in a decent home my whole life, and now I'm living like a college student. And it's all because of your greed. I listened in silence. Michael can't sleep at night. He's worried sick. You've ruined his life. You've destroyed our family. You are a heartless, selfish person. And one day, everything you've done will come back to haunt you. Are you finished? I asked calmly. No, I'm not finished. I demand that you give my son back his belongings, at least half the furniture, the appliances. He invested in this condo for 3 years, buying things, doing repairs. You owe him compensation. Brenda, I said, this is my condo. Everything in it is mine. Michael lived here rent-free. He made no financial investments. The renovations were done before he moved in, as was the furniture. If he bought anything, it was a gift. And you don't return gifts. Exactly. Gifts. He gave you flowers, jewelry, clothes. You should return all of it. I chuckled. You want me to return the flowers he gave me 2 years ago? The ones that have already wilted? Don't be a smartass. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I do. I understand that you expected to move into a fully furnished apartment, push me out, and live happily ever after. It didn't work out. Get over it. You'll regret this. Brenda's voice rose to a shriek. I'll find a way to sue you for compensation. I'll find witnesses and prove that Michael invested money. You'll pay for everything. Good luck with that, I said evenly and hung up. I blocked the number. Half an hour later, Michael called from a different number, his work phone. I need to get my things, he said, without a greeting. Not everything fit in my bag. When can I come by? Your things are in storage. I sent you the address. I'm talking about my things that are still in the condo. There is nothing of yours left in the condo. Everything you didn't take, I packed up and took to the storage unit as well. A pause. Even my laptop? You had your laptop with you when you left. I forgot the charger. And my headphones. And my books on the shelf. They're at the storage unit. He exhaled heavily. You really threw everything out? Yes. I don't want anything in my home that reminds me of you. That's cruel. It's fair. Silence hung between us. Then he asked quietly, So, that's it? We're not a couple anymore? We stopped being a couple the moment you yanked my dresses out of the closet and threw them on the floor. I'm just making it official. I didn't mean to. I was under a lot of stress. Mom was calling, rushing me. I wasn't thinking straight. You were thinking perfectly straight. You decided that your mother was more important than your wife. That was your choice, Michael. Live with it. What if I said I was wrong? That I want to come back? Without my mother? A pause. Well, she's alone now. I can't just abandon her. You see? You're still choosing her. So the matter is closed. You're impossible. Perhaps. But at least I have a roof over my head. You have 120 square feet in a boarding house with your mom. Enjoy. I disconnected the call and blocked that number too. Then I emailed my boss, requesting a personal day due to family circumstances. My manager replied, Of course, take the time you need. I spent the day at home, reorganizing. The closet was now entirely mine. I carefully hung up my dresses, folded my sweaters, and arranged my shoes. In the bathroom, I cleared out all the men's toiletries, leaving only my own. In the kitchen, I threw out the foods Michael loved that I couldn't stand. Gradually, the apartment became exactly as I wanted it, with no compromises, no traces of anyone else's habits. That evening, my own mom called. I briefly told her what had happened. She listened silently, then sighed. Well, maybe it's for the best. I always had a feeling that Michael was a weak man, a real mama's boy. She had him wrapped around her little finger. Had, I corrected her. Now they're just wrapped around each other. And you? Do you have any regrets? I thought for a moment, listening to my own feelings. No, Mom. No regrets. Good. Your whole life is ahead of you. You'll find someone decent, someone who will appreciate you. We chatted a little longer. Mom told me about her garden, and I promised to visit on the weekend. We said our goodbyes warmly. That night, Brenda texted me, again from a new number. A long message filled with reproaches, accusations, and threats. I skimmed it, blocked the number, and deleted the message. In the morning, another one came through, this time from Michael. It was also long, but with a different tone, pleading, pathetic. He wrote that he couldn't live with his mother in one room, that she was driving him crazy, that he realized his mistake. He begged for another chance, promising that his mother would move out, that he would arrange everything. I replied with a single word, no, and blocked the number. A week went by. I fell back into my usual rhythm, work, home, seeing friends. The apartment no longer felt like a battlefield. It was my sanctuary. In the evenings I read, watched movies, and cooked my favorite meals, taking my time, not catering to anyone else. On the 8th day, Jessica called. Hey, so, funny story. Mark ran into Michael near the subway station. He said he looks awful. Gaunt, unshaven, a total mess. And, well, I just thought you should know. Why? Jessica hesitated. I don't know. In case you felt sorry for him. I don't, I said firmly. He's a grown man. He chose this path. I'm not obligated to save him. Okay, just wanted to let you know. Thanks. But I don't need to. We talked about other things and then hung up. I put down the phone and realized it was true. I felt no pity, no guilt, only calm. 2 weeks later, I overheard a coworker talking about her friend who was renting out a room in a shared house. Out of curiosity, I asked where it was. It turned out to be in the same neighborhood where Brenda had sold her apartment. My coworker gave me the details. It was a cheap room, but the housemates were decent and quiet. I nodded and made a mental note. Not for myself, just in case. That evening, I created a temporary email address and wrote to Michael. Your mother could rent a room at this address. I included the contact information my coworker had given me. I added, this is the last piece of help you will ever get from me. Do not write back. I didn't wait for a reply or check for one. I had done what I could. The rest was not my concern. A month passed. Life had settled into a comfortable new normal. I no longer flinched at the sound of the doorbell or braced myself for new demands. Brenda and Michael had faded into the background, somewhere on the outskirts of the city, in their 120 square foot room, and it no longer concerned me. One evening, I was walking home from the grocery store and ran into Michael. He was coming out of a pharmacy, holding a bag of medication. He saw me and froze. His face was indeed gaunt, his eyes red. I gave him a neutral nod and started to walk past. He called out, "Wait." I stopped and turned. "What? How are you?" "I'm fine." He fidgeted, then forced the words out. "I wanted to apologize. For everything. I was wrong." "Okay," I nodded. "Apology accepted. And that's it?" He stammered. "What else is there?" "Well, maybe we could talk? Work things out?" "Michael, everything has already been worked out. You're living with your mother. I'm living alone. We each got what we chose. But I didn't choose this." He stepped closer, his voice trembling. I didn't know how to say no to Mom. She did so much for me, I couldn't betray her. But you could betray me," I shrugged. "There's always a choice, Michael. You chose her. Deal with it." "She's unbearable," he said, closing his eyes. "It's constant fighting. She blames me for everything, says I ruined her life, demands I get her a separate apartment, but I don't have the money. I can barely afford the rent on this room." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "But that's not my problem. I know. It's really hard. It's always been hard for you, Michael. You just used to shift that burden onto me. Now you're carrying it yourself." "That's fair." He nodded, looking down. "I really messed up." "Yes, you did." We stood in silence for a moment. Then I gave him a final nod and walked away. He didn't call after me this time. At home, I put my groceries away, made some tea, and sat by the window, looking out at the evening city. I thought about how strange it all was. 6 months ago, I was Michael's wife, trying to be a good daughter-in-law, making plans for our future. Now, I was alone in my condo and felt happier than ever. because this was my life, my space, my rules, and no one could tell me how to live it anymore. 3 weeks after running into Michael, my coworker, the one who had told me about the room for rent, called. She said that Brenda had indeed rented the room but had already managed to get into fights with her housemates. She demanded complete silence after 8 p.m., claimed the best spot in the refrigerator, and criticized everyone else's cooking. The housemates were putting up with it, but they were close to kicking her out. I listened, thanked her for the information, but felt nothing. Brenda was making her own bed. It had nothing to do with me anymore. Another week later, I saw an online ad, room for rent in a quiet house. Affordable for a single person. The contact number was Michael's. So, they had separated. Brenda was in the shared house, and Michael had moved out on his own. I smirked. So much for that. The mother and son, who were so desperate to live together, in perfect harmony, couldn't last a month in 120 square feet. I had warned him it was a bad idea, but no one listened. I closed the ad, shut down my computer, and went to the window, opening it wide. The spring breeze filled the room, carrying the scent of blooming trees. The city was alive, and I was a part of it, free, independent, and secure within the walls of my own home. Brenda's 7 suitcases sat in the storage unit for the entire month. Then I received a notification. The storage period had expired, and the contents had been sent for disposal. Brenda never claimed them. Maybe she didn't have the money for a truck to move them, or maybe she just didn't care. Or perhaps she realized that all that heirloom china, new linen, and fancy clothing meant nothing if you had nowhere to put it. I didn't bother to find out. I deleted the notification and closed the chapter for good. The part of my life with Michael and his mother was over. A new one had begun, and it was infinitely better. That evening, I was scrolling through my phone while sipping coffee and came across a post from Jessica. She had posted a photo from our last get-together, with the caption, "With my best friend, who knows how to stand up for herself." I smiled and liked the post. Yes, I did. And I had proven it. My phone vibrated. A new message. Unknown number. I opened it cautiously. "It's Brenda. Are you happy now? You've ruined my life. I'm living in a room with strangers. My son has abandoned me. My things are gone. I hope you can sleep at night." I read it, sighed, and typed a reply. "Brenda, you ruined your own life. You sold your apartment without thinking of the consequences. You invaded someone else's home without an invitation. You demanded the impossible. I simply protected myself. Good night." I sent it, blocked the number, finished my coffee, rinsed the cup, and went to bed. I did, in fact, sleep very peacefully. Another 2 months passed. I met an old acquaintance at a coffee shop. We got to talking, and he asked about my personal life. I briefly recounted the story with Michael and Brenda. He whistled. "Harsh. But fair." "Exactly," I nodded. "No regrets? You were together for 3 years." I thought about it, then shook my head. At first, it was strange, kind of empty. But then I realized it wasn't emptiness. It was freedom. And I like it. He smiled and raised his cup. "To freedom." I clinked my cup against his. "To freedom." We chatted a bit more, exchanged numbers, and went our separate ways. I walked home thinking that life is a strange thing. Sometimes it takes away what you thought was important, only to give you something you never even dreamed of: peace, confidence, and the right to live your life without being beholden to anyone's expectations. At home, I made some herbal tea and curled up on the sofa with a book. Twilight was falling outside, and the city was lighting up. The apartment was quiet, cozy, and filled with my presence. It was my space, my fortress, and no one would ever dare to challenge that again. I turned a page and lost myself in the story. Life went on. My life. And it was beautiful. Just the way it was. A month after that coffee shop conversation, I ran into Brenda's former neighbor, an older woman named Tamara who always seemed to be carrying a grocery tote. She recognized me and stopped, leaning in conspiratorially. "Dear, you were Brenda's daughter-in-law, right?" "I was," I said neutrally. "Well, you won't believe what's been going on." Tamara was clearly bursting to share the gossip. "Brenda's living in a shared house now, over on the south side. A friend of mine rents the room next to hers, and she tells me everything. It's a total nightmare. I had no interest in hearing gossip, but Tamara was already on a roll. She tried to boss everyone around. Can you believe it? Moved in and immediately started making demands. No music after 8 p.m., strict turns for using the kitchen, and she always had to be first in the bathroom. The other tenants put up with it at first, but then they had enough. They held a house meeting and told her she was just a renter like everyone else, no special privileges. Brenda burst into tears, going on about being old and sick and getting no respect. But nobody bought it. I see. I tried to excuse myself, but Tamara continued, and Michael has completely abandoned her. He used to visit the first month, bring groceries, but then less and less. Now he doesn't show up at all. Brenda says he won't even answer her calls. I guess he's mad that his mother ruined his life. So now they're both miserable, but apart. Thank you for the information, I said politely. I really have to go. Oh, of course, dear. I just thought you might be interested. I said goodbye and walked on. The information was indeed interesting, but nothing more. Brenda had gotten exactly what she deserved: loneliness, a home that wasn't hers, and annoyed housemates. And Michael had realized that living with his mother was unbearable and had run away. A little late, but better than never. At home, I put the kettle on, got out some cookies, and sat down at my laptop. I had a report to finish for work, and the deadline was looming. I dove into the numbers and charts, forgetting about everything else. Work was a good distraction, grounding me in reality. That evening, my mom called to check in. I told her about my run-in with Tamara. My mom snorted. Well, there you have it. That Brenda dug her own grave. She wanted to live the high life with her son and ended up in a shared house with strangers. Justice is served. You could say that, I smiled. And you, my dear, you did great not letting them walk all over you. I'm so proud of you. My mom's words were a warm comfort. We chatted about small things before saying goodnight. I went to bed early and woke up feeling refreshed. The weekend was ahead, full of plans. A deep clean of the apartment, a get-together with friends, a trip to the movies. Life without Michael and his mother was both busy and peaceful. On Saturday, as I was washing the windows, the doorbell rang. I tensed up. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and saw Michael. He was hunched over, hands in his pockets, his face ashen. I sighed and opened the door, leaving the chain lock on. What do you want? To talk. 5 minutes, that's all. I hesitated, then unfastened the chain and stepped back. Michael walked in and looked around. The apartment had changed. New curtains, rearranged furniture, fresh flowers on the windowsill. He noticed and nodded. It looks nice. Cozy. Thanks. What did you come here to say? Michael walked into the living room and stood by the window. I came to say that you were right. About everything. My mother is impossible. I thought we could make it work, but we couldn't. She demands attention 24/7, criticizes my every move, blames me for everything. I couldn't take it anymore, so I moved out. I know, I said, crossing my arms. I heard. From who? It doesn't matter. What do you want, Michael? He turned and looked me straight in the eye. I want to apologize. For real. Not just on the street, but here, in your home, which I almost took from you. I'm sorry. I was a blind idiot. I was silent, looking at him. I saw exhaustion, remorse, and disappointment. But I didn't see love, the spark that had once connected us. It was gone, and he knew it too. I forgive you, Michael. But that doesn't change anything. I know, he nodded. I didn't come here to ask you to take me back. I came to close this chapter like a decent human being. Okay, I nodded. Consider it closed. He pulled an envelope from his pocket and handed it to me. These are the divorce papers. I've already filed with the court. It'll be finalized in a month. I just wanted to give you a heads up so you wouldn't be surprised by the summons. I took the envelope and opened it. It was a copy of the divorce filing. I looked up. Thanks for filing it yourself. You saved me the trouble. It's the least I could do. We stood in silence. Then Michael asked quietly, Are you seeing someone? That's none of your business. Right. Sorry. He moved towards the door. I walked him out. At the threshold, he turned back. Be happy. You deserve it. You too, I answered sincerely, without your mother hanging around your neck. He gave a bitter smile, nodded, and left. I closed the door and leaned against it. A divorce. The official end. Strangely, the feeling of relief was stronger than any sadness. This chapter was finally, definitively closed, and I could move on. A week later, the official summons arrived from the court, with the date and time for the divorce hearing. I marked it on my calendar and filed the papers away. I didn't feel much emotion. It was all logical, inevitable. On the appointed day, I arrived at the courthouse 10 minutes early. Michael was already waiting in the hallway, sitting on a bench, scrolling through his phone. He saw me, stood up, and gave a brief nod. I nodded back. 5 minutes later, we were called into a small office. The procedure took 15 minutes. A clerk asked standard questions. We gave one-word answers, signed the documents, and were handed our copies of the divorce decree. Just like that, we were officially single. On the way out, Michael lingered, as if he wanted to say something. I didn't wait. I nodded goodbye and headed for the exit. He called out, "Wait!" I stopped and turned. "What now?" "My mom was asking about you." I couldn't help but laugh. "Seriously? And what did she want to know?" "Well, how you were doing. If you'd changed your mind about letting her move back in." I laughed out loud. "Michael, are you serious? Your mother is still hoping to come back to my condo?" He blushed and shrugged. "That's just how she is. She never gives up." "Well, you can tell her there is zero chance. Absolutely zero. Even if I were on my deathbed, I wouldn't let her cross my threshold." "Got it?" "Got it. I'll tell her." We went our separate ways. I walked to the subway, smiling to myself. Brenda was even more stubborn than I'd thought. But stubbornness without leverage is just noise. At home, I added the divorce decree to the folder with my other important documents. Then I changed my clothes, made coffee, and put on my favorite music. Life went on, and it was entirely mine. Another 3 months passed. Autumn arrived, painting the city in gold and crimson. I was walking through the park with Jessica, discussing vacation plans. She was suggesting a trip to the beach. I was leaning towards the mountains. Our conversation was interrupted by a call from an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Hello, it's Tamara. You remember me, Brenda's former neighbor?" "I remember." "What's wrong?" "Well, I just thought you might be interested. They evicted Brenda from the shared house." I stopped walking, frowning. "Evicted? How?" "Just like that. She caused such a scene that the other tenants got together and demanded the landlord remove her. She threw out someone else's pot because, she said, it was too old. The owner of the pot went after her. A fight broke out. The police were called. In the end, the landlord terminated her lease and put her things on the curb. Now she's staying with Michael, sleeping on a mattress on his floor." I pictured it. Michael in his rented room, with his mother on a mattress on the floor. 120 square feet for two. All over again. "I see. Thanks for the update." "No problem. I just thought you might be curious about how they're doing." I said goodbye and hung up. Jessica was looking at me expectantly. "What was that?" I told her the story. Jessica whistled. "Wow. So they're back together?" "Looks like it." "How's Michael taking it?" "He must be losing his mind." "I'm sure he is. But what's he going to do? He can't leave his mother on the street." Jessica shook her head. "Talk about karma. They wanted to live together, and now they've got it. Stuck with each other for life." We walked on, changing the subject, but thoughts of Brenda and Michael swirled in my head all evening. Not out of pity, but out of a morbid curiosity. I wondered how long they would last this time. A month? 2? A year? The answer came sooner than I expected. A week later, my coworker, the one who'd told me about the room, messaged me. She said Michael was looking for a place for his mother, calling everyone he knew, begging for help. But Brenda's reputation as a troublemaker had spread. Everyone knew she was cantankerous and impossible to live with, and no one wanted to get involved. I read the message, replied with a simple, "Thanks for letting me know," and deleted the chat. I wasn't sad. I wasn't happy. It was just a fact. Brenda had built her own destiny. She sold her home in pursuit of a fantasy life with her son, invaded someone else's space, and poisoned every relationship with her personality. Now, she was reaping what she had sown. Another month passed. Winter covered the city in snow and long, dark evenings. I celebrated New Year's Eve with my friends loudly, joyfully, without a single thought for the past. I made a wish at midnight, for the new year to be peaceful and happy. And it started out exactly that way. In mid-January, my mom called, her voice agitated. "You won't believe it. I saw Michael at the market today. He was buying vegetables, and he looked so gaunt, pale, just exhausted. I couldn't help myself. I went up and asked how he was. He said things are tough. His mother is living with him, he lost his job, he has no money. They're barely scraping by." He lost his job? I was surprised. Yes. He said his nerves were shot, and he started making mistakes at work, so they let him go. Now he's looking for something new, but hasn't found anything yet. And Brenda is demanding he support her, and she yells at him if he spends any money on himself. I was silent, processing the news. "Mom, I don't feel sorry for him." "I'm not asking you to," my mom said quickly. "I just thought I'd tell you what I saw. You were married to him, after all. I thought you might be interested." "Thanks, but I'm not, really." We talked about other things and said our goodbyes. I put the phone down and thought. Michael's life was spiraling downwards. He had lost his wife, his home, his peace of mind, and now his job. All because he couldn't say no to his mother. It was sad, but it was also inevitable. A month later, I heard through the grapevine that Brenda had been hospitalized. Her blood pressure had skyrocketed to critical levels, and she was rushed to the emergency room. Michael was running himself ragged between his new, low-paying job and the hospital. He looked like a squeezed-out lemon. The information came from the ever-watchful Tamara, who seemed to be following her former neighbor's fate with an unhealthy fascination. I listened, said thank you, and forgot about it. Brenda was an adult. She had a son who was taking care of her grudgingly, perhaps. But he was there. This was their story, not mine. Spring arrived unexpectedly, warm and sunny. I signed up for a French class to brush up on the language. I went twice a week, met new people, and expanded my social circle. My life was filling up with new events, emotions, and plans. Michael and Brenda were relegated to the back of my mind, like an unpleasant but finished chapter. In early May, Jessica texted me, "Hey, so I heard something. Michael and his mom moved out to the countryside somewhere. They're renting a house at the edge of a village because it's cheaper than the city. Brenda is telling everyone it's temporary, just until Michael can afford a proper place. But everyone knows it's forever." I read the text and smirked. A village at the edge of nowhere. The house was probably old, drafty, with no modern conveniences. Brenda, who had dreamed of a 3-bedroom condo downtown, breakfast in bed, and doting grandchildren, had ended up in a rural shack with a son who could barely make ends meet. It was the height of absurdity. I texted Jessica back. "Well, to each their own." She sent back a shrugging emoji. The summer flew by in a whirlwind of travel, get-togethers, and work. I went to the beach, then the mountains, then visited my parents at their house. I came back to the city tanned, rested, and full of energy. My apartment greeted me with its cool, quiet, familiar comfort. I unpacked my suitcase, made tea, and sat by the window. The city hummed below. Life was bustling, people were rushing about their business, and I sat in my condo, in my space, and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. I had defended what was mine. I hadn't let them break me, push me out, or use me. I had won this battle without resorting to cruelty, violence, or illegal means. I had simply stood my ground. In the fall, I met a man. We met in my French class, started talking, and found we had a lot in common. He was calm, intelligent, and respected boundaries. He didn't offer unsolicited advice, didn't try to control me, and didn't have a horde of demanding relatives. We took things slow, getting to know each other, building a relationship carefully, and it felt right. One day, he asked about my past. I told him briefly, I'd been married, it didn't work out, we got divorced. He nodded and didn't pry. The past stayed in the past. Winter once again blanketed the city. At the end of December, right before New Year's, Tamara called me. I was surprised. I hadn't heard from her in a long time. "Dear, I'm so sorry to bother you." The old woman's voice was hesitant. "I just thought you should know. Michael and his mother are back in the city. The country life didn't work out, it was too cold, too expensive to heat the house. They're renting a corner of a room in someone's apartment on the far side of town. They live in the same room, sleeping on cots. Brenda is doing very poorly. She barely gets out of bed. Michael is working himself to the bone just to support her. I listened in silence. Tamara continued. A friend of mine saw them at the store. She said it was a pitiful sight. Michael is a skeleton, and Brenda looks ancient. They buy the cheapest food, counting every penny, checking the receipt for every single item. And to think, Brenda used to dine at fancy restaurants. Remember? I remember, I said evenly. Well, that's the news. I feel sorry for them, to be honest. They brought it on themselves, but still, it's a sad state of affairs. I see. Thank you for letting me know. I said goodbye and hung up, then sat on the sofa, hugging my knees. Did I feel sorry for them? No. I just felt tired of the whole topic. Brenda and Michael had made their choices and were living with the consequences. Justice had been served without any intervention from me. Life itself had sorted things out. That evening, I told my new partner about the call. He listened, then nodded. It's a tough story, but you did the right thing. If you had given in, they would have devoured you. I know, I nodded. That's why I have no regrets. We celebrated New Year's Eve together, just the two of us, quietly and cozily. We made wishes, drank champagne, and hugged as the clock struck midnight. I watched the fireworks bloom over the city and thought about how much had changed in 2 years. 2 years ago, I was Michael's wife, enduring Brenda's invasion, fighting for my home. Now, I was free and happy, with a man by my side who valued me. I had my home, my job, my friends, my plans. I had built the life I wanted, and no one could destroy it. Another 6 months passed. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole. A woman in her 50s with a tired face stood there. I opened the door on the chain. Yes? Are you Michael Miller's ex-wife? Yes. Who are you? I'm a social worker. Michael has been admitted to the hospital. Severe exhaustion and a nervous breakdown. His mother is with him. She's also in poor health. We need to contact his relatives, but you're the only one listed in his file. I was silent, taking in the information. The woman continued. I understand you're not obligated to help, but perhaps you have contact information for any other relatives? Or friends who could take responsibility for them? Michael has no other relatives, I said evenly. His mother raised him alone. He had friends, but after everything that happened, I imagine they've scattered. I see, the woman nodded. In that case, we'll have to place them in a state-run facility. But I wanted to inform you personally, in case you wanted to visit. I shook my head. I don't owe them anything anymore. I understand. I'm sorry to have bothered you. She left. I closed the door and leaned against it. A state-run facility. A nursing home for Brenda. A rehabilitation center for Michael. An end that neither of them could have ever planned. I felt no triumph, no pity, just a hollow emptiness. They were finally completely out of my life, and that was right. That evening, I told my partner about the visit. He held me close and said, "You did everything you could. You protected yourself. The rest is not your responsibility." I know, I nodded, leaning against him. It's just sad that it came to this. They chose this path themselves. Yes, they did. We sat in silence, holding each other, listening to the quiet of the apartment. My apartment, the very space I had fought for 2 years ago. It had stayed with me. It had protected me. It had become the foundation of my new life. Several more months went by. I heard no more news of Brenda or Michael. Tamara stopped calling. The story had finally run its course. I didn't seek out information myself. I had no desire to dredge up the past. One spring evening, I was walking home from work. I turned into my familiar courtyard, went up to my floor, and opened the door with my key. The apartment smelled of dinner. My partner was cooking. He had moved in with me 3 months ago. We had discussed it, weighed the pros and cons, and made the decision together. He respected my space and didn't try to change it to suit himself. We were building a life together without breaking down each other's boundaries. Hey, he came out of the kitchen and hugged me. How was your day? Good. Tiring, but good. Dinner's almost ready. Go get changed. I went into the bedroom, changed out of my work clothes into something comfortable, and glanced in the mirror. A calm face, clear eyes, a faint smile. I was genuinely happy. Over dinner, we discussed our summer plans. He suggested we visit his parents at their cabin, so I could officially meet them. I agreed, looking forward to it. His family was warm and welcoming, with no toxicity or manipulation. I liked that. After dinner, we sat on the sofa, watching a movie. He had his arm around me, and I leaned against him, feeling safe. Not because he was protecting me from the outside world, but because he wasn't attacking me from within our relationship. This was real intimacy, without conditions or games. Before bed, I stepped out onto the balcony for a breath of fresh air. The city lights twinkled below, a low hum rising from the streets. Somewhere out there, in that vast anthill, were Brenda and Michael. Or maybe they weren't anymore. I didn't know, and I didn't want to know. Their story had ended for me 2 years ago, the day they walked out of my apartment with 2 suitcases. The 7 suitcases never made it back to Brenda. They were disposed of by the storage company, just as promised. All that heirloom china, new linen, and fancy clothing all gone, a symbol of collapsed ambitions and unfulfilled plans. I went back inside and closed the balcony door. I got into bed next to the man who loved me unconditionally. He wrapped his arm around me in his sleep. I closed my eyes and drifted off peacefully, knowing that tomorrow would be a new day. My day? In my condo? In my life? The ordeal with Brenda and Michael taught me the most important lesson. Never surrender your boundaries. Never sacrifice your personal space for someone else's ambitions. And never let yourself be manipulated by guilt or a false sense of obligation. I had protected myself, my home, and my right to a peaceful life, and I didn't regret it for a second. Brenda had once told me that I would be sorry, that I would end up alone. She was wrong. I'm not alone. I have a partner who chose me, not one who was forced upon me. I have a home, a job, friends, and plans for the future. I have a life that I built for myself, without looking over my shoulder for anyone's approval. And Brenda? She got exactly what she deserved. Loneliness among strangers. A son who was burdened by her, but no longer loved her. Poverty, illness, and the bitter taste of disappointment. She had wanted breakfast in bed and doting grandchildren. She got a cot in a rented room and utility bills she couldn't afford to pay. Justice had prevailed. Without my involvement, without revenge, without gloating, life itself had put everything in its proper place. And that was the best ending I could have imagined. I turned on my side and hugged my pillow. Outside, the city was falling asleep. The lights in the windows were going out. The sound of traffic was fading. My apartment breathed with silence and peace. Here, I was in charge. Here, I was free. Here, I was happy. And no one would ever take that away from me again.